Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's we're rediving into a pretty intense topic that has been making waves in military and geopolitical circles. The increasing encounters between Chinese and American military forces in the Indo-Pacific. Specifically, we're going to break down an incident that highlights a dangerous game of cat and mouse being played in the skies and why it's a much bigger deal than you might think. We're talking about a situation where a Chinese fighter jet aggressively intercepted a US helicopter. Now, you might think, okay, a fighter jet versus a helicopter. It's not a fair fight. And you're right, it isn't. That's precisely the point. And it reveals a lot about the shifting dynamics and strategies at play. So let's set the scene. These encounters aren't happening in a vacuum. They're reoccurring in international airspace over regions like the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait areas of immense strategic importance. The US and its allies conduct what are known as freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight operations here. The official stance is that they are upholding international law, which guarantees passage for all nations through these international waters and airspace. From Washington's perspective, it's about maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific, ensuring that trade routes, which are the lifeblood of the global economy, remain accessible to everyone. Billions of dollars in trade pass through these lanes every single day, so keeping them open is a global economic security issue. However, Beijing sees things very, very differently. China claims vast swaths of the South China Sea as its own sovereign territory, a claim not recognized by international law and rejected by an international tribunal in 2016. So when a U.S. military asset, be it a ship or an aircraft, enters this area, China views it as a provocation, a challenge to its sovereignty. This is the fundamental clash of perspectives that is setting the stage for these increasingly risky face-offs. The US says we're flying in international airspace, as is our right. China says, you're in our backyard and we don't like it. This disagreement isn't just academic, it's leading to real-world confrontations that are getting more and more dangerous. Now let us talk about the specific type of incident we're refocusing on today, the interception of a US helicopter by a Chinese fighter jet. We've seen several videos and reports of these encounters. Typically, a US Navy Seahawk helicopter, often operating from a destroyer or cruiser, will be on a routine mission. This could be anything from surveillance to anti-submarine warfare patrols. Suddenly, a Chinese jet, like a J-11 or J-16, appears. And it doesn't just fly by. These jets perform what the Pentagon calls unsafe and unprofessional maneuvers. They might fly extremely close, sometimes just a few hundred feet from the helicopter, cutting in front of it, or flying erratically in its vicinity. Why is this so incredibly dangerous? Let's break down the physics and the aerodynamics. A helicopter generates lift very differently from a fixed-wing aircraft. It relies on its large rotor blades to chop through the air. A fighter jet, on the other hand, is a high-performance machine designed for speed and agility. When a jet flies close to a helicopter, it creates something called wake turbulence. This is a powerful vortex of swirling air that trails behind the jet's wings. For a massive commercial airliner, this turbulence can be unsettling. For a relatively lightweight helicopter, it can be catastrophic. The helicopter's rotor system is sensitive to changes in air pressure and flow. If it gets caught in a jet's wake turbulence, the pilot can momentarily lose control of the aircraft, causing it to pitch or roll violently. In a worst-case scenario, this could lead to a complete loss of control and a crash. The pilots in these situations are highly skilled, but they are being pushed to the absolute limit. So, the big question is, why would China take such a risk? Why harass a helicopter, which poses absolutely no offensive threat to a supersonic fighter jet? This isn't a dogfight. It's a deliberate act of intimidation, and it's all about sending a message. The first part of the message is purely tactical. China is demonstrating its capability and its willingness to operate aggressively in what it considers its sphere of influence. They are testing US operational procedures. How do our pilots react? What are their rules of engagement? How far can we push them before they back off? Each of these encounters is a data-gathering opportunity for the People's Liberation Army Air Force, or PLAAF. They're learning our playbook. The second, and perhaps more important, message is strategic and political. By targeting a helicopter, China is engaging in what military analysts call gray zone tactics. These are actions that are hostile and coercive, but are designed to fall just below the threshold of an act of war. It's a way to assert dominance and challenge the U.S. presence without firing a shot. Think about the psychology here. Harassing a warship is one thing, but harassing a helicopter feels different. It's a more vulnerable asset, and the risk to human life in an accident is incredibly high and very visible. China is essentially saying, we are willing to risk causing a fatal accident to make our point. Are you willing to risk your sailors and aviators' lives to be here? It's a high-stakes game of chicken played out tens of thousands of feet in the air. This is what makes it a potential big mistake for China. While it might seem like a clever, low-cost way to push back, the risk of miscalculation is enormous. What happens if that wake turbulence does cause a crash? What if a U.S. helicopter goes down and American service members are lost? An incident like that could escalate with unpredictable speed. It could trigger a diplomatic crisis, or, in the worst-case scenario, a military response. Public and political pressure in the United States to retaliate would be immense. It would instantly transform the situation from a gray zone competition into a full-blown international crisis. And that's a scenario that nobody, including Beijing, should want. The potential for a small incident to spiral into a major conflict is very real. Moreover, these actions are counterproductive to China's broader goals. China wants to be seen as a responsible global power, a leader on the world stage. But these aggressive actions do the opposite. They paint a picture of a nation that is willing to disregard international norms and safety for its own territorial ambitions. This doesn't win you friends or influence. In fact, it pushes regional partners countries like the Philippines, Japan, Australia, and South Korea closer to the United States. When they see this kind of behavior, it reinforces their desire for a strong security partnership with Washington as a counterbalance. So, every time a Chinese jet buzzes a U.S. aircraft, it strengthens the very alliances that China wants to weaken. We have to remember that the men and women flying these helicopters are professionals. They are trained to handle extreme situations. But there is a difference between handling an emergency and being forced into one by the reckless actions of another pilot. It's a testament to their skill and composure that we haven't had a major tragedy yet. But hope and skill are not a sustainable strategy. Professional militaries rely on established codes of conduct and communication to de-escalate situations and avoid accidents. By repeatedly violating these basic principles of safe airmanship, the PLAAF is playing with fire. So, what's the takeaway here? This isn't just about military hardware or distant geopolitical chess moves. It's about a pattern of behavior that is making a critical region of the world less safe. The challenge of a U.S. helicopter is a calculated act of intimidation, a high-risk gamble that could easily go wrong. While it may serve China's short-term goal of signaling displeasure, it carries the immense risk of unintended escalation and undermines its own long-term strategic objectives. It's a dangerous game where the stakes are incredibly high, not just for the pilots in the cockpit, but for global peace and stability. The world is watching, hoping that professionalism and restraint will prevail before a mistake is made that can't be undone. Thanks so much for tuning in today. This is a complex issue, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the endgame here? And how should the U.S. and its allies respond? If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.